Don't miss Folger Theater's How Shakespeare Saved My Life, playing now through July 5th at Folger Shakespeare Library. The autobiographical solo comedy by Broadway star Jacob Ming Trent has been called a vivid, deeply personal narrative about survival, resilience, and the transformative power of language by stage and cinema. Born with a gift for poetry but rejected as unfit to play the part of a poet, Ming Trent invites us to take a deep dive into the crevices of his youth. Calling on the bard and a host of genius rappers, half-crazed preachers, and soulful poets, he takes us on a propulsive ride that reaffirms the power of language and music. Folger Theater delivers yet again, says the Washington lobbyist. Go see it, bring a friend, talk about it after. Tickets start at $20 and can be purchased online at folger.edu or by phone at 202-544-7077, Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Get yours today. Alliance Française of Washington, D.C. kicks off classes July 7th, every level, beginning to advanced. Not sure yet? Try a free Zoom trial class the week of June 22nd. Register before June 18th and save with their early bird discount. Visit francedc.org to sign up or become a member today, because why not spend your summer sounding a little more Parisian? Today on CityCast DC, the dust is settling on DC's mayoral election, and plenty of people are trying to interpret just what message the electorate was sending. I decided to outsource that job to DC Councilmember Christina Henderson. She's worked closely with Janeese Lewis George in her time on the council, but she has also pushed for a somewhat different set of priorities than the likely next mayor. I talked with her about what the progressive surge may mean for the council and the city going forward. Today is Monday, June 22nd. I'm Michael Schaefer. Here's what DC's talking about. Councilmember, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So Janeese Lewis George and Robert White have both won their Democratic nominations for mayor and U.S. delegate, respectively. And even beyond that, it was a really big night for progressives in the council. Did you foresee this kind of outcome?
I think I did. In DC, people often we want to group everyone, right? In a Democratic town where everyone is Democratic, or mostly Democrats, everyone is trying to find what are the differences amongst the few. But I actually think that it came down to like the types of campaigns that folks ran and the enthusiasm behind particular candidates that actually carried them over the finish line. I think the golden rule of elections is people are they're going to vote for one of two things. You're either going to vote to enthusiastically support a particular candidate or a cause, or you're voting angrily against someone else. What we saw here was an enthusiastic support for one set of candidates.
And that enthusiastic support seemed to adhere to... I take your point about wanting to group people, and it's dangerous to do that. But at the same time, if everyone's got a D next to your name and you're not like the most informed citizen, the groups help because you sort of would probably go with someone who reflects your general inclinations. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me the ones who reflect the general inclinations more towards the left, more towards activist government, had a very strong night. What was it that made their potential voters so motivated?
I think this was definitely a change election, motivated, I think, in a part by the fact that we have vacancies for the first time in multiple decades.
Mm-hmm.
In the delegate seat, it was multiple decades. For the first time, you had an opportunity to choose a new path. And then, for the first time in 12 years in terms of the mayor's seat. So I think people were motivated by the desire for change. This was kind of the interesting thing. I was speaking to another reporter. The Kenyon McDuffie, who was chair of the Judiciary Committee, I don't think anybody would call him a conservative Democrat, right? He was actually quite progressive in some of the reforms that he pushed and the types of oversight that he pushed as well. And so I think it's, in comparison to someone else, how do you look? But it's not always that nuanced.
So what does it mean now? I mean, there's that old cliche of you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose, but maybe now it's like you campaign in memes and you govern in like the budget. So now we have a very progressive mayor and a delegate also thought of as very progressive. People who've campaigned on a much more ambitious agenda for council. But you've been up there and you guys have had a really hard time because there is not enough money to do a lot of the stuff you want. So what happens when that kind of ambition meets the bank account as we have it now?
I mean, I think you are sort of seeing that play out just in general. There are lots of things that the council have put forward, I have put forward in terms of legislation, that the price tag of it is just too big. And while those are some of the very same things that, Councilmember Lewis George campaigned on, at the end of the day, the question is, okay, well, how do you pay for it? How do we come up with $52 million recurring for this particular thing at the same time that commercial real estate is depressing? We're not seeing the same amount of population growth that we were maybe a decade ago. And so I think that the realities of the job actually force moderation. Just in terms of you can't do it all at one time. And I think that we're kind of seeing that play out in New York already. Some would say that Mayor Mandami he campaigned in this sort of very progressive light. But if you actually look in terms of the actions since he has been in office, they haven't been as drastic as, say, some of his campaign rhetoric, in part because the real realities of government and bureaucracy set in. And so I know that there were some people who were, very nervous about what happens if Councilmember Lewis George was to be successful here. But I think the guardrails of government still exist. They don't just go away. And then all of a sudden there's like money falling from the sky to be able to deliver at the same, I think I don't see how she delivers on any of these things without some large infusion of cash. And the question is, where does that come from? And I think that will bring some tension.
Right. So Council Chairman Mendelson told reporters, I guess early this month or maybe late last month, that he sees it as almost inevitable that there be new taxes next year. You guys are going to be talking, within the next couple of weeks about Councilmember Nadeau's proposal that she's floated of a wealth tax. There's been a lot of arguing about what constitutes wealth, but that's different from the question of whether you should have more tax. How do you see this breaking down with the council that we have and or the one we're likely to have?
We vote on Tuesday on the budget. That's the final vote on the Tuesday. If I had to take a guess, I would imagine that there probably won't be a quote unquote wealth tax increase that happens this year. But the realities are in terms of spending cliffs of how things are, right? So we are required to do our budget on a 4-year financial plan. We have more money available to us in fiscal year 27 than will be available to us in FY 28. And so it's just natural of sort of right now we're going down, right? And so if you want to at least maintain the current spending, you're going to have to figure out how do you raise revenues to be able to do that. There's a lot that can be accomplished from efficiencies within government and sort of cleaning up some of that. I'll give you an example. We joked about disposable wipes earlier, but like if we're talking about trash pickup in the district, right now I've got the Department of Public Works and the Department of General Services that all do trash pickup. And they don't necessarily do it all well. And it gets very confusing for agencies. Are there efficiencies that can be realized there if you had just one agency responsible for trash pickup for the entire city? Hard to say, we'll kind of see. So I think that is one area, but it's certainly not enough to be able to continue some of the more expensive programs that people have become accustomed to. And frankly, that in many cases are working for us.
You can't speak for your colleagues, but speak for yourself. What guides you as when you think about like the not so fun way of getting new revenue? What are your own personal guardrails and red lines and whatnot?
So a red line for me has always been around property taxes. We have a lot of neighborhoods in the district where, a retiree bought their home 30, 40 years ago, and the neighborhood around them changed. Now, their wealth is in their home, but their ability to stay in that home depends on whether or not their very limited income allows for them to pay property taxes. And so I feel like that is super important. We can't go any further on commercial property taxes because we simply don't have the occupancies downtown to be able to do that. I think the other thing is around when we raise taxes, what exactly are we raising taxes for? So I voted for a tax increase in 2021. That was an income tax increase, and it was for three things. It was for early childhood educators, the expanded earned income tax credit, and housing vouchers. Three things. You could communicate it, you could talk about it. I think when you get into trouble with tax increases is when you allow for it to become a Christmas tree and a cornucopia effect, and people don't actually know why we're doing the thing that we're doing. And so I think that's the question, is how do you sort of communicate that piece? There was an estimate that was done even on the wealth tax, and it said, okay, you'll get X amount of money. I think it's like 125 million. Let's just say that, for instance, 125 million in the first year. And then banking for people to change their behavior, right? Either leave the district, change how they do, right? They'll now spend, 3 more months in Florida as opposed to here in the district and those kinds of things. Then it drops precipitously in the following year. So these are always the hard things around revenue raisers, is that they're not consistent, because we as humans, our financial behaviors are not consistent as well. And it truly depends on these external factors of what's going on. I think one of the frustrating things that I've had over the last year is that so much of what is riding on the economics of the district is not anything that we on the council control. It is very much influenced by what's happening with the federal government. And until there is a change there, we're a victim to their changing whims.
Don't miss Folger Theater's How Shakespeare Saved My Life, playing now through July 5th at Folger Shakespeare Library. The autobiographical solo comedy by Broadway star Jacob Ming Trent has been called a vivid, deeply personal narrative about survival, resilience, and the transformative power of language by stage and cinema. Born with a gift for poetry but rejected as unfit to play the part of a poet, Ming Trent invites us to take a deep dive into the crevices of his youth. Calling on the bard and a host of genius rappers, half-crazed preachers, and soulful poets, he takes us on a propulsive ride that reaffirms the power of language and music. Folger Theater delivers yet again, says the Washington lobbyist. Go see it, bring a friend, talk about it after. Tickets start at $20 and can be purchased online at folger.edu or by phone at 202-544-7077, Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Get yours today. For the last, decade or so, you alluded to this earlier, that the council has been, the way we in the media at least have shorthanded it, there's been a progressive bloc and a more moderate bloc. And while Mayor Bowser has been mayor, the mayor has acted as something of a brake on the more progressive instincts in the council. These dynamics are obviously going to change a little bit with a new mayor who's who was a member of that progressive bloc, and with a changed council composition. What does that do to you? You're someone who hasn't been part of that bloc, and you're someone who has maintained, as best I can tell, pretty good relations across the spectrum in our politics. What does that do to your work?
I don't know. I want to believe that it makes it a bit more important. At the end of the day, you could be a progressive bloc all day, but if you don't have 7 votes, or if you don't have 9 votes for emergency, then you don't have, a success. And there have been a couple of instances where I have been the deciding factor piece there. But I think it's also just around having conversations with whoever the new colleagues are that are coming on. There are going to be a lot of new council members, and many of whom haven't worked in government before. They have been around the edges of government. And it honestly is sometimes a little jarring wake-up call when you do have that briefing with the chief financial officer and you realize, oh no, I can't do the thing that I thought from the outside just seemed so easy, and I just didn't understand why the council was never doing the thing, I think it becomes a little bit harder on that front, but I'm hopeful that I can continue to have a pragmatic approach to what we're doing, but also really speak to responsibility in terms of government and accountability, right? We don't want to go back to where we were, the district, in terms of the 80s and 90s. And that requires us to be very financially prudent about what we're doing because, believe it or not, although some people are like, fight, right? Congress can always take this away. And if not take it away, they can reimpose the Financial Control Board. And I know that people think that we're always talking about this from like a mythical standpoint, but like the Control Board legislation wasn't repealed. It's just dormant.
Mm-hmm.
In so much as we are able to follow the rules, right, of balanced budgets, meeting the deadlines, et cetera. And so we don't want to give them a reason to bring it back. I personally don't want to govern under a financial control board situation, particularly when you have this administration and this crop of Republicans who are currently in leadership.
So look, we've just come out of a campaign where, allowing for heated emotions of campaigns and so on, some of the voices that amplified by social media are, you all are obsessed with the 90s and you keep citing the control board and the budget and the bond market as a reason not to do things, and, talking about people as corporate stooges and so on. What are your feelings? Like, what's the tone going to be like in a new and more progressive council? What's your confidence level in, are we going to have good debates?
Again, I hope we are. One of my frustrations about the way that the campaigns were kind of run, particularly all of these forums and questionnaires that everybody would send out, is that everybody asks yes, no questions as though every scenario presented to the government every day is a yes, no scenario and not one filled of nuance, right?
But we got to do that, or else you politicians will give us a bunch of nuance and squiggle out of answering.
Sure. And also, right, it doesn't always have to be absolute. There are definitely ways to sort of lay a foundation for you to get to where you want to go over time, where it doesn't require everything all at once. That is $100 million that you don't have. You know what I'm saying? If you could take the 15 and grow to 100 over 4 years, why not take that versus nothing? And that's not necessarily sort of a moderation piece, but I would say to your first point around the folks who are like, oh, you guys are just stuck in the 90s and blah, blah, blah. If last year wasn't a wake-up call for folks in terms of one staffer on a House Oversight Committee deciding that the District of Columbia should be treated as a federal agency and therefore $1 billion be just swiped from the budget, sitting in those meetings with members of Congress who are like, I hear you and I understand you, and yet the train is moving, so good luck to you all, right? That exists. I think the problem is that people assume that we're dealing with rational actors when it comes to Capitol Hill, and we certainly are not.
Right. And we might be dealing with a totally different set of actors that's more favorable to the council.
My hope comes January of 2027 is that we're dealing with a different crop of members of Congress. But we also have to continue that relationship with them to educate them. So much of my conversations with the Hill is about education of no, this is how it works in DC, and no, this is what we're doing in XYZ. Don't listen to the internet. Don't listen to the fringe people who are suggesting that this is the one way that things are kind of going. And so that's what I'm saying is that I feel like they're going to be good debates, but I also feel like they're going to be pieces of just a reality check. And I love that we will start a new council period with all of these folks, and we will start with performance oversight hearings, because I feel like that is the best way for a new freshman to get a crash course in all of DC government, not just the parts that you care about and that you have focused on, but all of it that we have to deal with.
For the uninitiated, what does performance oversight hearings mean?
So performance oversight hearings are an annual process where we literally bring in every agency before the council to answer questions about the previous year. Did you do the things that you said you were going to do? Did you accomplish the things that you said you were going to do? Did you spend the money the way that you were going to spend it? It is like a check-in. Now, these hearings can happen. Of course, there are oversight hearings that happen all through the year, but the annual hearings is literally every single agency has a date and a time before the body and on the record. I'm hoping that the new council members decide to come to hearings. That hasn't always been the case for some colleagues, where they sometimes only come to legislative meetings. They don't do oversight hearings, but oversight hearings is how you learn. And I feel like some of the rhetoric, even that I heard from some of the forums and otherwise, I was like, oh, y'all are not we are all not operating from the same set of facts.
Well, right. And so in your set of facts, I mean, it's pretty clear from the election, from the things that both these candidates spent a lot of time talking about, which I assume they had pollsters tell them what was important to people. The cost of living, the lack of affordable housing, some anxiety about public safety, the cost of living, like childcare. As someone who deals in the world both of oversight and of writing budgets, what are the tools you got in that toolbox to actually take these things on?
Whew, that's kind of where it gets hard, right?
Right.
The cost of childcare goes up every year. I know that Councilmember Lewis George has this proposal where it was like, you'll spend no more than 7% of your income on childcare. Great. I'm actually very familiar with this proposal because Senator Patty Murray and Representative Rosa DeLauro have a similar proposal on the federal side that was there when I worked for them. I don't know how we deliver on that type of promise with only local money. Right, that requires a federal infusion of cash for us to be able to deliver on that, because the entire DC budget can't just be childcare subsidy. I can't. I got other entitlements I have to pay for. When it comes to housing and the cost of housing, there also has to be this other side that a lot of folks don't want to talk about, which is like the government itself. We are not great at housing. We're not great at building. We're not great at managing properties. And, as evident by what's happening in terms of the public housing space. And over time, we have been trying to get out of that business, which is how we got into the more voucher space in terms of private housing.
I talked to people during the campaign who think the opposite, think we should get more into this business.
I mean, I'm just silly. Like when I sit and I talk to the people who actually build, right? The Building Industry Association, the Developers Roundtable, right? I know that these are sort of the quote unquote, people view them as villains, but at the end of the day, these are the folks who are building in our city and building in the region. If we are really going to bring down the cost of housing and really deliver on 72,000 units of new housing in 4 years, we have got to convince the investors to come back to the district. And I don't know how we convince the investors to come back to the district while you're also pursuing some of the other policies that actually make investors have cold feet.
Right. Well, it sounds like if you're maintaining this line of argument, it sounds to me like you're going to be in the front lines of some battles, because I think there's people who have a different way of looking at it. Is that something you're excited about, nervous about?
I don't think of myself as a quote unquote conservative thinker. I think of myself as pragmatic. I know what the goal is, and then I understand what are the ways in which we can deliver on it, and let's try to be creative in sort of delivering on it. But at the same time, I want it to be sustainable. I want my program, if I am putting forth an idea for a policy, I want it to outlive me. I want it to outlive my time in government. And the only way to do that is for you to establish a program that is sustainable. So I don't know. I don't want to start off by thinking like there's going to be some like crazy battles, if you will. We might have to have some very real conversations. And I think having some very real conversations with constituents around what is the realities of the financial situation that we are currently in. The day after the election, there were a lot of these sort of, I don't want to say think pieces, but there were definitely a lot of these like, this is a rejection of moderate policies. This is a rejection of businesses and blah, blah, blah. And also it could just be that one of the candidates just ran a terrible campaign and didn't provide a vision of an alternative that people wanted to enthusiastically support or vote for.
You think you'd ever like to be the one offering a vision of the alternative?
I don't know.
On a citywide level?
We're not there, but I'm going to do my part on the council side of things. And I do feel like sometimes when you have an opportunity to sit down with constituents and have conversations with them and just explain it, right? Because I feel like there are times when folks are like, oh, you're giving me a lot of, you're using a lot of jargons, you're using a lot of acronyms, but just explaining the economics. I hope that most people would just sort of understand that you can't do all the things at one time and imagine that it would be sustainable and successful. A city can't work without all of its parts.
Listen, I imagine a lot of people ahead of this election that we've just finished looked at the set of facts and thought, okay, here's a city that's got some budget troubles. Here's a city whose main industry is contracting and is under the control of someone who has stated his desire to make it contract even more. Here is a city where the mayor is going to have to deal with the president of the country, who has been a really, really difficult person to deal with. And mayor, like, no thanks, I don't want to do that. Were people right to be so pessimistic? I mean, give me your gut check about the state of the city. Is it a poison chalice that Janeese Lewis George is about to start drinking from?
I don't think it's a poison chalice. There's a old theory of, quote unquote, the hollowed prize, right? Once you get there, it's sort of hollowed out, if you will. But I do feel like there are definitely some very real challenges that a lot of people who are not in it every day dismiss as being a challenge, right? They dismiss it. And when we have seen the examples of it, it's sort of like, oh, no, we're going to figure that out. And I want to be hopeful. I am going to be hopeful, right? I want the city to win. I want the city to be thriving. I want to get us back on track before sort of where we were pre this administration. Because while we weren't like going gangbusters, we were certainly moving in the right direction. And then, the 2024 election happened, and then here we are again.
Right. But to your point, you've got this situation where we've lost in the region like about 100,000 jobs, about half of them in DC, just from federal cuts. And it's not like, okay, you're the mayor of some city and the steel mill's going to close and they say they're going to close because the taxes are too high or what the regulation. There's no sort of fault of DC's leadership in causing the federal firings. That makes it must make for legislators, for mayors, for anybody, it must make it a very difficult situation in which to legislate if your goal is to get more jobs and more wages for people.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sucks. It is not the easiest thing in the world. I recently had a conversation with the CFO, and it hit me in that conversation. I was like, oh, you're never going to revise our revenue estimates upward in a consistent trajectory until after 2028. Right? He kind of gave me this look, and I was like, you just have to understand how frustrating that is, because it means that there's nothing I can do as a elected official who represents the entire city to change your mind so long as this other person exists. But I do feel like there are ways to do it. DC as a city, we have so much to offer businesses and families and people who want to live, grow, thrive, and retire here. I do feel like it will be refreshing to have someone new who is essentially the chief PR officer for the District of Columbia and making that pitch to others that this is a great place to live, thrive, work, and be, right? And I think that's part of it. Not only that, but also sort of changing the framework and mind frame of some of our agencies on the businesses side of things, who in the past have been very much viewing like, oh, well, we're the nation's capital, we're DC, you want to be here, so you're going to follow our 50 million 11 rules, even though they don't make sense. And then what happened was Virginia and Maryland they're cool now again, like the burbs, right? Fairfax and what's happening in Reston and some of these other places. Virginia and Maryland have gotten together in terms of doing, tax incentives to get businesses to come to their areas and all those different types of things. And so our mindset needs to change here in the district. And I know that's very frustrating for folks because they're like, no, all of our money and our attention should be going to the social safety net. But I can't pay for the social safety net if I don't have these other things, right? And so we have to figure out how to grow. And I think that we could do both, even in the midst of what's happening on the federal side of things. Like, I don't feel like we can just throw our hands up just because, portions of our country and certain states in the Midwest decided, let's give it a go one more time. But it's going to be a hard job. It's not just, and I don't think it's a mayor's job alone. I think it's the council's job too. But how we talk about DC, how we talk about growth, how we talk about our desires around thriving, and being, a bustling city of maybe 1 million people one day. I think that's going to be the deciding factor of like, is this easier, or is this going to be an uphill battle?
Last question before I let you go. I ran into you Tuesday night. You were walking into the Janeese Lewis George victory party. I assume you were just there to say congratulations. But if she'd asked you for advice, what would you have said? Like, what's your overriding advice to the new mayor?
Let me start with, I've sat next to Janeese for the last 6 years. She has been my seatmate on the dais. Me, Janeese, Brooke, and then we added Zachary Parker to our tribe. We talk almost every day. And so I think the biggest piece is that, like, you got to hire good people. And that's the thing I've been saying to her on the side throughout this whole campaign is, like, talk about, like, when the time comes, you have to talk about who you're going to hire, because the mayor can't be everywhere. The mayor can't do everything. But do you have people around you who are going to tell you the truth, or do you have people around you who are just going to yes you to death? If you have people who are going to yes you to death, you will not be successful. If you have people who are going to be solution oriented, but who are also going to tell you, hey, mayor, this isn't working out and we need to make some changes, I think that's how you be successful, in the long run, even with the other outward challenges that we're facing. If we could deliver on the day-to-day services of city government, right? Because I think for most people, most voters, they want, when they finally have to call a government agency, they want somebody to actually pick up the phone and be helpful. They want their trash to be picked up on time. They don't want to lose a tire to potholes every 6 months. When they take their kid to the splash pad at 10:30, they want the water to be on as it is advertised, right? Like those types of things. And I think actually Janeese will be very good at delivering that. But you got to put together a solid team who believes like you believe, in terms of, we work for the people, we're here for the people, and we should deliver for the people.
Councilmember, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter, and become a CityCast DC member to support our work. You can do that at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.